When you spend 2 decades wearing a motorcycle club patch, serving in leadership, and half a century raised in the life, among some of the largest organizations on record, there are several life lessons to be learned. This is one of those lessons. Let me start out by saying this is the first time I've used an AI animation feature for this series. So let me apologize ahead of time. You happen to see something that looks similar to your patch or club name, know that it was not intentional, and I have edited this thing 10 times to get rid of real club names and similar patches. And I also want to acknowledge to all of the club leaders who've reached out to me through various platforms and complimented this series. When it comes from the top of some of the largest clubs in history, from people I haven't even met, it is unexpected but much appreciated. Love and respect back to you all. What are your motives? Not just in a club, but what are your motives in your life? I mean, is it your intention to be a good person? Is your motivation to help your club or your fellow man? Maybe I should ask you this instead. Do you think that you are a good person? One thing I learned in the club life, probably even more than in real life, is that truth is that you are the villain in someone's conversation somewhere. Usually it's because you either stand in their way of something they want, or you have what they don't have. Because my experience has been the people that hate you the most don't even know you, and quite possibly the people that you hate, you don't really know them either. Let me say this, I'm aware that I'm not always the nicest person, nor have I been in the past. I was born with zero patience or tolerance for bullshit, which often makes me less accommodating or empathetic as other people. I have an extremely sarcastic sense of humor and outlook on life. I am neither an optimist nor a pessimist because life has just made me a realist. And I live by a phrase that some people can't stand, and that is, it is what it is. If I love someone, my love comes hard. My motivation for the people I love is a swift kick in the ass if I see no effort. But it means I would die for you, but I expect no less from you. And I understand that's a high bar to expect. Obviously, I've had multiple sit-downs with very dangerous people who are in high-ranking positions. And some of those sit-downs were because of very stressful situations, where going into the meeting, you already know that you don't agree. But I sat down with someone who, it was a very high-ranking person in his organization. In fact, he was the top guy for several years of thousands of members. This was our second sit-down in just a few months due to escalating situations. I had earned his respect, and he earned mine at the first sit-down. But having said that, I knew neither one of us were going to be all that giving of anything, because that's just who we are. And thankfully, after that first meeting, he knew my sense of humor. And by the way, this meeting was prearranged for me by my national president, who I think honestly was just trying to intentionally get me killed the last 2 years that I was in charge. So I rode in with 2 of my heavy hitters, and about 10 other warlords and 2 other chapter leaders from our chapters. They greeted us by opening the gate, let us into their compound, and we were shooting the shit, and the national leader invites me into their clubhouse, and I go in with 4 guys and myself, while the rest stayed outside watching everything. We had a bit of casual conversation at first, and grabbed a beer. There was a table and chairs set up right in the center of the clubhouse floor, which I assume was for us, and we took a seat. He sat down across from me. He kind of looks around the room, and he asked the chapter boss how many of their guys were inside the clubhouse. I think somebody shouted out 7, and he looked over at us, and he told his guy, well, they've only got 5 in here, so 2 of our guys need to leave, so the numbers are even. I looked across the table at him with a half smirk, and I said, it looks even to me. He just laughed, looked down and shook his head like, are you kidding me? So we began the conversation and debated a few facts from our previous meeting. And the crux of the conversation was really that they weren't pleased that we had opened a clubhouse in their area. But we had already established at the previous meeting that the protocols were followed, and calls were made to the right people before that happened. But to their point, we had agreed that our guys would act appropriately in that town since we were the new guys, and the other club had established hangouts that they didn't want trouble in because they liked going there. And contrary to our agreement, one of our guys had showed his ass with his actions in one of their established bars. At some point, his chapter boss had said that they really didn't want us in that town. Now, he wasn't a part of the previous conversations about us setting up in that area, because generally it was above his pay grade anyway. So I just looked at him and said, "Well, it's a good thing I don't take orders from you then, or I'd be in trouble, wouldn't I?" Like I said before, I was not born with a whole lot of patience, and I was getting tired of rehashing a point that had already been established. The national leader looked over at me. He said something to the effect about me opening new clubhouses all over the state. I said, "Really? We've only opened 2 new clubhouses in the last 20 years, but it seems that every time I do, you people jump and get all bent out of shape." And I told him, "I don't understand why you guys get all concerned every time I open a clubhouse. We aren't your enemies. I didn't set up here to cause you guys any kind of grief, but I'm over it. We can either shake hands and be friends, or we can knuckle the fuck up, whichever way you want to handle it." He sat straight up in his chair and looked across at me. He tried to keep a serious face, but couldn't help but start laughing again. And through his laugh he said, "Goddamn Tabasco, is that how we're going to start this meeting?" What instantly came to my mind was that scene from Tombstone, when during a poker game, Doc Holliday says to Ed Bailey, "Does this mean we're not friends anymore? You know, Ed, if I thought you weren't my friend, I just don't think I could bear it." Right before shooting Ed Bailey and then saying, "There, now we can be friends again." But what I said instead was, "Well, what the fuck, man? I thought we were friends. Are we not friends?" He just kind of shook his head and looked down at his notepad again, still chuckling, and said, "We're something." Well, I'd like to think that we were friends, but I guess maybe we weren't. Because his club is the one that put the $30,000 bounty out on me, my number 2 in command, and my state warlord and bodyguard not long after that meeting. And it stuck for about the next 2 years, until I retired my patch. And here's the real kicker of it all. I had come from his club family originally. I am the former president of the United States Mother Chapter, and served that position for 4 years prior. I had been trained and promoted by his former national leaders at the very top, just a decade prior. So I guess the lesson is, sometimes your enemies become your friends. Sometimes your friends become your enemies. The way I see it, if you aren't pissing somebody off somewhere, then you don't matter enough to anyone anywhere. But what the hell do I know? I'm just Tabasco, the biker. Keep it real.
In the club life you get one shot to prove that you're a man, one shot to be the best you can, one shot to show that